You know, usually when we talk about being well-adjusted, it is basically the ultimate compliment. I mean, it means you're functioning, you're happy, you pay your taxes, you go to Sunday brunch.
Right, yeah, you're this measurable success story. It implies a kind of perfect harmony with your environment, you know? Like you fit the mold that society created for you, and you just don't make a fuss.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of existential philosophy, and suddenly that entire concept just gets turned totally upside down.
Oh, completely. We're looking at a psychological landscape today where feeling perfectly well-adjusted might actually just be, well, a very comfortable, highly orchestrated delusion.
Yeah, and even wilder, what if the moments where you feel this profound, paralyzing existential dread are not a sign of mental illness at all? Like, what if they're a sign that you are finally paying attention to reality?
Right. It completely flips the script on what the medical community considers a disorder. I mean, we are really forced to ask if the healthy people are actually the sick ones.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring some truly mind-bending ideas today with you. Our main guide is this massive English essay by the Norwegian philosopher Herman Tennessen. It's called The Serio-Comic Encounter of Clinical Psychology and Existential Philosophy.
Yeah, quite a title. And we're also blending in a Norwegian biographical piece about Tennyson's life, specifically looking at how he mixed this heavy existentialism with empirical language analysis, plus some fragmented notes on existentialist thought just to round it out.
Okay, let's unpack this. What if your darkest, most anxious late-night thoughts about the meaninglessness of life aren't symptoms to be cured, but an actual awakening?
To really grasp this dilemma, we have to start by zooming way out. Right? You have to look at the grand, somewhat absurd situation humanity actually finds itself in. And Tennyson illustrates this with a really powerful and frankly kind of terrifying metaphor.
I know exactly the one you mean.
Yeah, he asks us to imagine spaceship Earth.
Which sounds like a very classic 1960s sci-fi trope, but he takes it in a very specific, dark direction.
He really does. So he describes humanity as passengers on a spaceship that is just hurtling through this immense, absurdly indifferent, vast, and deadly void.
Right.
Out the window, it's just a completely vacuous, freezing, apathetic universe. It does not care about us at all. But inside the ship,
Inside the ship, people are just ignoring it.
exactly, the passengers aren't looking out the windows in cosmic terror. Instead, they're busying themselves. They're frantically polishing the ship's brass. They are making these platitudinal small-talk comments about the weather. And they're playing incredibly serious, high-stakes games of bridge.
Just totally distracted.
Right. They are what Tennyson calls ontologically secure. They implicitly believe in the permanency of things and the profound meaning of their little tasks.
It makes me think of being on a luxury cruise ship that is very, very slowly sinking.
Ugh.
But the crew's entire job is to keep you distracted at the 24-hour buffet, so you never actually look out the porthole and see the dark water rising.
Oh, that's a phenomenal way to look at it.
Everyone is well adjusted to the buffet. They're arguing about the crab legs while the ship goes down.
Right, right. But then Tennyson introduces the character of the dummy. So in a game of bridge, the dummy is the player whose hand is exposed and who just has to sit out the play.
They have nothing to do.
Exactly. So imagine this champion brass polisher who is currently the dummy in the card game, just wanders off to lie down in his cabin. He is suddenly suffering from an acute, totally uncaused depression.
Oh, wow.
The room is quiet, and in that silence, he is struck by this unbearable agony. He sees himself for what he physically is. It's just an upholstered pile of bones and knuckles, a ludicrously brief interlude between an embryo and a corpse.
He realizes he's just a temporary arrangement of meat on a rock flying through a dead vacuum. I mean, the illusion of the buffet just shatters for him.
And the inevitable question hits him, what is it all about? All his petty ambitions in brass polishing and bridge playing just evaporate into thin air.
Because none of it matters.
Right. He is filled with dread, but also a strange new compassion for his fellow travelers who are still oblivious. Tennyson says this man has now become a philosopher. He has become an alienated cosmopath.
Cosmopath, I love that term.
It's wonderful, isn't it? It means someone whose pathology, whose sickness, is simply being aware of the cosmos.
Which, ironically, makes him a patient for clinical psychologists, because society looks at this guy who has just realized the actual factual truth of his cosmic situation and says, oh no, he's sick, he's depressed.
We need to fix him.
Exactly. We need to fix him so he can get back to polishing the brass with a big smile.
Which brings up a massive question. If this realization is the undeniable truth of our existence, Why do we fight so incredibly hard to avoid it? I mean, why do we spend our lives willfully ignoring the void outside the window?
Yeah, why do we do that?
Well, Tennyson argues that historically our dominant ways of thinking have actively encouraged this blind detachment. He breaks the history of philosophy down into three categories: the brain, the eye, and the heart.
Let's break those down because the historical anecdotes Tennyson uses here really clarify how we hide from reality.
Okay, so let's start with brain philosophy. This is rationalism. It is completely detached, sitting high up in an ivory tower, dealing with absolute, eternal forms and logic. It basically refuses to engage with the messy physical world. And the perfect example Tennyson uses is the ancient philosopher Zeno.
I couldn't help but laugh at the Zeno story when I was reading through this. I mean, Zeno logically proves to his students that motion is impossible.
He really commits to the bit.
He does. He goes through this whole elaborate, bulletproof mathematical deduction. And another philosopher, Diogenes, is just sitting in the audience. So to rebut Zeno, Diogenes simply stands up, walks around the room, and sits back down.
He just literally walked.
Yeah, he essentially says, look, I'm moving, motion is real. And Zeno's response is basically to tell his students, thank you to Diogenes for illustrating my point. You all just saw him perform a motion, which I have just logically proven is impossible. So the lesson here is never trust your own deceptive eyes.
It's wild. It is the ultimate intellectual detachment from reality.
Yep.
If the world doesn't fit your comfortable theory, you just ignore the world. So that's the brain.
Right.
Then we have eye philosophy. This is empiricism. It's still detached, but now it is the detachment of pure, unfeeling observation. I think of a scientist looking through a microscope. Tennyson points to Hippocrates, the father of medicine, as the paradigm here.
Okay, how so?
Well, Hippocrates advised his students to just write down the observed symptoms of the patient and absolutely nothing else.
Yeah, there is this chilling example of the eye philosopher doctor sitting next to a dying patient. The doctor is just utterly unruffled, taking clinical notes like 10:45 a.m., pulse imperceptible, 10:48 a.m., death struggle begun, 11:02 a.m., no pulse, patient is dead.
Completely cold.
Right. There is zero emotional engagement with the tragedy of a human life ending. It is just raw data.
And both the brain and the eye allow us to stay safely insulated from the horror of the void.
Yeah.
We either logic it away or we observe it so coldly that it just cannot hurt us.
Makes sense.
But then we get to heart philosophy, which is Tennyson's term for existentialism. This was the romantic, messy reaction against all that existential lethargy. Heart philosophy demands engagement. It demands that we recognize our free will, our initiative, and the incredibly heavy burden of our own choices.
It refuses to let us hide behind logical laws or scientific data.
Exactly.
But, I found myself really pushing back on this while reading, or at least questioning how human beings actually react to that demand. Because if heart philosophy demands we take radical responsibility for our choices, humans will fight tooth and nail to avoid that pressure.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer weight of having to choose is agonizing.
Yeah. When I was looking through Tennyson's background, I found this story about him teaching a logic course to high-ranking NATO officers, and it perfectly illustrates this panic.
Oh, this is a brilliant example of the psychology of evasion. How did they react?
So Tennyson gives these military men a hypothetical scenario. A Norwegian torpedo boat commander during a war discovers a helpless Russian battleship trapped in a Greenland fjord. Tennyson asks the officers to simply map out the choice alternatives for the commander.
This is pretty straightforward.
You would think. But the officers violently protested. They were furious at the exercise.
Why?
Because they deeply resented the very idea that the commander had to make a choice. They argued that a commander just compares militarily relevant data with the direction for usage manual, and the correct action just automatically emerges. No human choice required.
That is wild. They wanted to completely outsource their moral agency to a manual. They just could not stomach the anxiety of free will.
Not at all.
And Tennyson found the exact same psychological defense with lawyers who had served as judges. They desperately wanted to view themselves as passive media, just organic machines comparing juridical data to a set of legal codes.
Just running the algorithm.
Right. By convincing themselves they had no agency, they could send a man to prison for years, completely ruin his life, and still eat a juicy steak for lunch with a totally clear conscience.
Because they didn't do it, the code did it. It's a phenomenal defense mechanism. But if we are so desperate to avoid making real choices, how do we even function in society? Like, how do we interact? Tennyson suggests we build a buffer, and that buffer is language itself.
Yes, the roadblock of ordinary language.
Mm-hmm.
Tennyson and the Oslo School empirically demonstrated that the very words we use to communicate are often just ceremonial. He called it the dusture, basically chatter or small talk.
Just noise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He argued that up to 90% of our daily language is just this meaningless, comforting repetition. We literally do not know what we were talking about most of the time. We are just making sounds that make us feel secure.
There's this fascinating post-WWII study he ran on Oslo jurists that absolutely blew my mind. He interviewed 150 jurists about the ongoing legal trials, specifically asking them to define passive NS members, meaning passive members of the Nazi sympathizer party. And just to be clear for you listening, we aren't taking any political stance here. We're just purely looking at how the original source material analyzed their language.
Right, just looking at the linguistic data.
Exactly. So he found that different political factions were using the exact same phrase, passive member, but they held entirely different, unrecognized definitions in their heads. One group defined it as someone who actively signed up but didn't do much, while another group defined it as someone who was signed up against their will.
And they had no idea.
None. They were arguing passionately with each other, totally unaware they weren't even having the same conversation. Ordinary language completely camouflages our differences, so we don't have to face them.
What's fascinating here is how Tennyson uses this language barrier to draw a line between two distinct types of knowledge. Because ordinary language keeps us comfortable. It keeps our knowledge purely intellectual. We can talk about death or war or meaninglessness, but it just stays in our heads.
It's safe.
Very safe. So Tennyson introduces this crucial concept of integrated knowledge. Knowing something intellectually, like in your brain, is fundamentally different from knowing it in your bones and marrow.
The integrated knowledge is where the existential dread actually lives.
Precisely. He uses this striking anecdote from the Finnish-Russian War of 1939 to explain the difference. The Finns catch a Russian spy behind their lines. The spy is a highly trained professional. He knows logically, intellectually, that he's going to be shot at dawn. It is an absolute, undeniable certainty.
Right.
Consequently, he appears completely stoic in court. He has the intellectual data, and he's handling it.
He has basically accepted the math of the situation.
But then the court proceedings drag on. It's this whole bureaucratic performance. Papers are shuffled, people whisper. And slowly, against his will, the spy gets drawn into the agonizing human drama of the trial. Finally, the judge stands up and formally reads the death sentence out loud in the room. And the spy completely collapses.
Even though he knew the outcome the whole time.
He couldn't have known it any better intellectually. But when the sentence was read, the knowledge suddenly integrated. It bypassed his intellectual defenses, penetrated his bones and marrow, and violently shook his entire personality structure. The reality of his non-existence became physically real to him.
I was really trying to wrap my head around this, and the other example Tennyson uses, Tolstoy's novella The Death of Ivan Ilyich, really brings it home.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah, Ivan Ilyich is a successful, well-adjusted judge. He learned the classic logical syllogism in school. Caius is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Caius is mortal. And Ivan totally agreed with that. Yes, Caius, the abstract man, is mortal.
Sure.
But when Ivan gets a terminal illness and realizes that he is going to die, that little Vanya who loved his toys and his mother's silk dress is going to permanently cease to exist, the knowledge integrates. It shatters him. He realizes he isn't an abstract concept, he is a dying animal. He screams incessantly for 3 days.
Which raises a massive question for us today. What happens when someone in our modern society actually integrates this knowledge? Like when the dummy in the bridge game realizes the absurdity of the spaceship, society doesn't throw them a parade for their philosophical breakthrough. Society sends them to a therapist.
Which brings us to the tragicomic clash between the cosmopath, the person sick with the universe, and clinical psychology. I mean, how does the mental health profession actually handle these awakened individuals?
Well, Tennyson argues that psychologists generally fall into two camps when faced with existential dread. First, you have the diagnostics. These are the extreme modern descendants of the I philosophy we talked about earlier.
Right, the observers.
Yes. They observe with total radical indifference. They suspend all judgment to an almost absurd, inhuman degree. Tennyson brings up a psychiatrist named Roland Kuhn and his patient, Rudolf.
This case study is completely wild.
It really pushes the boundaries. Rudolf is a man who desires a life of extreme taboo thrills, oscillating between necrophobia and necrophilia. Tennyson documents that at his peak, Rudolph copulates with slaughtered hogs the exact moment they are butchered.
And you would expect a psychiatrist to have a profound reaction to that level of distress or deviation. I mean, it's extreme.
You'd think so. But instead, the psychiatrist's clinical presentation essentially conveys, so what, doesn't everybody?
Oh.
It's extreme botanical classification. They just want to label the bizarre plant they have found. There is no moral or human engagement whatsoever with Rudolph's underlying despair.
Okay, so extreme detachment ignores the patient's humanity entirely. But if a therapist tries the opposite route and actually tries to comfort them, Tennyson hates that too, right?
Oh, he is incredibly scathing about the other camp, which he calls the prelatics. These are therapists who act more like Victorian preachers or pastors. Think of Viktor Frankl and his logotherapy. When a patient comes in suffering from integrated existential dread, the prelatic therapist doesn't stay detached. They actively intervene. They try to comfort the patient.
Which honestly sounds nice on the surface.
It does, until you look at the mechanism.
Yeah.
Tennyson argues that these therapists are essentially crafting tailor-made life lies or comforting myths to cure the patient's ontological despair.
To unsick them.
Exactly. They want to unsick the patient by giving them the pleasant illusion that they have discovered a profound meaning to life.
But really, the therapist is just providing a metaphysical armor. They're forcing the patient back into being a well-adjusted, brass-polishing passenger on the spaceship.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Tennyson uses an incredible analogy from World War II to highlight the sheer arrogance of this psychological approach. During the war, the military intentionally put completely colorblind spotters into Allied reconnaissance planes. Right, because their visual deficit actually gave them a strategic advantage.
Yes. Because they were colorblind, they couldn't be fooled by the enemy's standard visual camouflage. They could look down at a forest and immediately spot the concealed German V-2 missile positions that the healthy, normal vision pilots totally missed.
That's amazing.
So Tennyson suggests that the depressed patient, the one suffering from existential frustration, might actually be the colorblind spotter. Because of their so-called abnormal condition, they are cognitively right about the terrifying absurdity of life. They are seeing through the camouflage of meaning that society paints over the void, and the healthy therapist trying to cure them. The therapist is the one being deceived by society's camouflage.
It is a profound subversion of medicine. The patient is the one seeing reality clearly, and the doctor is the one peddling the delusion.
So if therapy is often just a tool to force us back into a comfortable delusion, how do the rest of us cope? I mean, if we can't unsee the void, how do we carry the sheer weight of existence without going mad?
For an answer to that, Tennyson turns to another Norwegian philosopher, Peter Wessel Zaffe. Zaffe coined a brilliant dark term, suification. It's derived from the Latin word sus, meaning swine or pig.
Suification, the act of turning oneself into a pig.
Precisely that. Zaffe argued that human beings are a biological tragedy because we are over-endowed with intellect. We have these massive, high spiritual demands for justice and purpose and meaning.
But the universe doesn't care.
Right. We have the intellectual honesty to look around and see that the universe provides absolutely none of that. It is a terrifying mismatch. So, to survive without going insane, we practice suification. We artificially lower our spiritual demands. We numb ourselves. We turn ourselves into happy, oblivious pigs, grunting with wholehearted contentment over our garbage.
And we achieve this certification through constant distraction, right?
Constantly. We use work, we use religion, we use ordinary language, we play bridge, we build increasingly complicated, useless machines.
Yeah.
We purposefully slice our lives up into petty, short-term goals, so we never have to look up and see the terrifying totality of our cosmic situation.
Which brings up a looming modern crisis that Tennyson touches on. As automation advances and destroys traditional labor, work will no longer be available as our primary method of suification. We are going to have too much leisure time.
Yeah, that's a big problem for the distracted mind.
And Aristotle warned long ago that a society unprepared for true leisure will degenerate. Tennyson mentions Robert Junk's studies on leisureosis. It's this idea that without the exhausting distraction of an 8-hour workday, people will desperately seek higher and higher thrills to numb the existential dread that starts creeping in.
The search for the ultimate sedation because the quiet just gets deafening.
There's this chilling anecdote in his notes about drug addicts discussing the ultimate high. They have tried sniffing glue, shooting shoe polish, heroin. But one addict finally says in a somber voice, "Do you know what the best high really is? It's death. and everyone in the room agrees.
Right.
Without work to distract us, the void gets very loud very fast. But I have to ask you, what is the ultimate takeaway here? Does Tennyson actually agree with Zaffer? Because Zapp's conclusion was that the only dignified exit for humanity is to simply stop reproducing and let the human race gracefully die out, just exit the stage. Is that where Tennyson lands?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the philosophy takes a fascinating turn. Tennyson actually parts ways with Zappa here. In fact, he explicitly sets out to out-Zap the Zap.
Wait, how do you out-pessimist the guy who says humanity's only noble choice is voluntary extinction?
By pointing out that even Zapp's vision of ultimate doom is way too arrogant. I mean, Zapp's assumes we have figured it all out, that we know for absolute certain the universe is a total dead end. Tennyson argues that this is epistemologically unwarranted, meaning we simply do not have enough information to make that claim.
We don't know everything.
Right, we don't. We are standing on the very threshold of cosmic mysteries. To say we know enough about reality to quit is a massive failure of intellectual imagination.
So we just keep going. Why? Just to endure the suffering.
We keep going because man is the sole principle of uncertainty in the universe. Tennyson paints this beautiful, strange picture. Imagine a super scientist trying to predict the cosmos. Without human beings, that scientist could predict every single movement of the stars and planets with maximum certainty.
Because it's just math.
You'd just be dead matter obeying strict physical laws. But the moment you add the tiny homeopathic ingredient of man into the universe, anything is possible. We break the formulas. We are entirely unpredictable.
We are the cosmic wildcards.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Tennyson says our battle cry shouldn't be to lie down and give up, but rather, man, let's go on. Not because we have some divine grand mission from a creator, not because it makes us happy or well-adjusted, but simply because we are the only remarkable, unpredictable thing in an otherwise dead cosmos. We shouldn't be conceited about it, but we are accidentally thrown into this world as its sole principle of uncertainty.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this on your commute right now? What does it mean? It means the next time you're sitting at your desk on a Tuesday afternoon or making small talk at a party and you feel that sudden cold pang of dread about what it all means, don't immediately assume you're broken. Don't assume you're sick and need to be medicated or fixed. You might just be experiencing a rare, fleeting moment of truly integrated knowledge. You might be the colorblind spotter, finally seeing through the camouflage of the 24-hour buffet.
And that leaves us with something really vital to reflect on as we go about our day. If Tennyson is right, and 90% of our daily language is just social suffocation, just meaningless chatter designed to protect us and everyone around us from the terrifying reality of our existence, what is the most honest, uncamouflaged sentence you have spoken today? Have you actually communicated something true to another human being, or are you just polishing the brass on the spaceship?